Okay, hello and good evening. I am going to do a very simple talk and demonstration about bolster fit-ups or guard fit-ups, or fittings, whatever you want to call them. These little pretty little brass bits that connect your hidden tang knife from your blade to your handle. Now, what I'll be showing off is going to work for most knives, but depending on what you're making, it may not work for everyone. But this is a very simple, very basic tools, basic process in order to achieve very consistent results. So let's just talk about some of the tools that we'll be using for this process. First, a big black kind of whiteout marker pen, which I'll be colouring my brass shortly. A saw frame, which is a jeweler's tool. This is a old German one I've had for a long time. And these are great. Make sure you've got spare saw blades, because you may break a couple of these learning this first couple of times. So keep that in mind. Next few tools we're going to need is a flat file. This is a Velour or a Grober file from one of these packs here. These are a moderately expensive file set and are again used for jewellery tools. You can just use a basic file, whatever you've got available to you, but flat and thin and narrow is the key for this next step. So that is the file you're going to need. Later on, you're going to need a drill bit. This is the size drill bit you're going to use, which I believe is a 2.5mm drill bit. I will check this shortly. And then next, you're going to need a scribe. So ignore this being a round file, but it's going to be a scribe with a nice sharp little point on it. You see that there. So we need that scribe mark later on. And a nice little 150mm long ruler is ideal. And then finally, your piece of brass that you're going to cut this slot into. So these are the tools, and I'm going to be explaining the next step very shortly. This chart on my piece of paper, taking note to the top left of the chart, all these squares represent sections of the process for fitting up a slotted guard, slotted fitting on your knife. So we start with a rectangle and we slowly work our way along. You're welcome to either screenshot this resource. We use this a lot in our weekend classes teaching, but you're welcome to take that as a screenshot just to log. You might find it informative. So we're going to put that guy aside for a sec and talk about our brass. Firstly, we're going to use our whiteout pen and colour in the brass. Okay, so I've changed the view, but that's my pen, and I'm just going to colour in this piece of brass. You don't have to colour the whole thing in, but I find it's really helpful. Think of this as your like daikon or layout material. It's quite handy. After you've done that, next you're going to get your ruler. Now, an optional tool you don't necessarily need is a set of vernier calipers. These are a really good tool, and you can get these pretty affordably these days. So this is a lifesaver in terms of measuring very, very fine things. So I'm going to be measuring the width of my slot. Bear in mind that this is a rectangular shape. Okay, so the height is a little bit taller than the width. I'm going to be measuring this guy very, very lightly, and I am 17mm wide. Now this has been very loosely cut, so it might be a bit different as I go. I'm going to then put two little marks, top and bottom, over my piece of brass with the scribe tool, or in this case my half round file. So one on top, and same thing again. Might be a bit faint on the camera, but two little dots. Then I'm going to use the straight edge of my ruler and put a line down the middle. This will be a very vivid line, and you'll see it pretty clearly. Just like that. Okay, now because this is only one part of the piece of the puzzle, or how you're fitting up your knives, you're going to need another reference point, mainly the thickness and the width of the knife that you're trying to fit this up to. That's why I've got this knife here as an example. So just to edit or kind of add to my talk, when I'm measuring this section here, that's not the measurement I'm actually aiming for. This was just used as a reference or guideline. When you're measuring the width of your tang, it's basically the measurement that is sitting beyond the shoulders, these two edges here. So when I was taking that measurement, it's done basically, yeah, under the shoulders, not this big old measurement here. So just to kind of add that to my video so it's not too confusing, but you can carry on with the rest. It's not this measurement. Your calipers will definitely help with this. You can use your ruler. So this blade is about 2.5 millimeters thick, and just at the base of where the tang becomes part of the blade, I'm about maybe 12.5 mil. I'm going to check those more accurately with the vernier calipers. Yep, about 2.5 mil, just 2.6 to be exact, and I am 13 millimeters on the other side. Cool. It's important to write these down when you're working. So if you've got a piece of paper or something and you're doing multiple fit-ups, assigning one of these to a number and then having that on a piece of paper with the measurements, if you're doing like 10 of them, that you can get pretty confused. So after I've got my measurements, I'm now going to transfer those onto my knife. I'm mainly focusing on the width of the tang at this stage. So this is the width that I'm trying to go for. So that's what I want. Now with the calipers, you can just transfer that mark straight over to your knife, to your piece of brass, which can make your life a little bit easier. I'm going to do that now. And put two little scratch marks in line with my central line. And they're just top and bottom like so. Okay. I usually like to make these a bit more clear, so I'll get my ruler and just go roughly 90 degrees, just so that they're a little bit more vivid or more pronounced. You have this kind of eye shape, like that. Okay. Next, the thickness of your tang matters. So we went back to 2.6 millimeters, which is quite important for this next step. Yep, 2.6. We'll just say 2.5 for the sake of this. And yes, this is a 2.5 mil drill bit. Now what's really important is you always drill your drill bits under size when you're fitting up your guard. The worst problem that you can encounter is when you are drilling your oversized holes and then you begin to cut out your slot. It can be very problematic over cutting or over drilling that hole diameter, and that means that you'll have a gap when you go to fit your knife up. You'll see a little gap just at the knife there, and that's not ideal. So always drill undersized. So in this case, I've got 1/4 millimeter on either side to work with, which should be fine. So the next step now is you're going to take your drill bit and measure the diameter. This is 2.5 millimeters. Now this is the tricky part. With your two lines that you've got left and right, or up and down, measuring the width of your tang, you need to account for the drill bit size. So for this example, I'm going to need to bring my lines in a small portion from the top and bottom, because if I drill over these two lines that intersect, my drill is going to be oversized and my slot will be oversized as well. So keep that in mind if you're doing big drill bits. If you do 5 mil, this is a large amount of material that it will cut oversized. So if we are 2.5 mil, I need to bring my line half of that diameter of that drill bit back. So I'm going to be doing it 1.25 mil. So I'm going to measure 1.25, which is not a lot of material with a small drill bit, but as I mentioned before, with larger drill bits, this can be important sets of measurements. So 1 on this side, 2 second side. Oops, I've got and scratched my brass. Just colour in these extra lines so no one gets too confused. Cool. So if you look carefully now, I've got a line on the top and the bottom, but they are inside my original lines. After I've done that, now I can go ahead to the drill press and begin drilling out my material. Keep in mind that these two new lines are where you'd be using a center punch, or you'd be drilling over those intersecting lines, not the outer line. So it's always these two inner lines when you're working. And just to reiterate, if you had a really big or thick tang and a thick slot that you needed to do, let's say it's 5 or 6 millimeters, you would need to be bringing in that 5 or 6 mil drill bit, or going by half. That means that you'll be bringing in 3 millimeters, which will be a lot of material to have to bring that slot in. Ultimately, you'll have a straight line with 2 holes sitting at either end. I'm going to go to the drill press now and drill those out so that you can get to the next step. Alright, so we're at the drill press. This is my fit up right now. I've kind of scratched the Sharpie off, but that's fine. My drill press, I'm quite fortunate for this, but has a little clamp on it, which is really nice. This is one of the Bosch PBD drill presses. I went to a friend's workshop and kind of basically bought one the following day. It has a really handy little laser light, which can save you a lot of stressful drillings if you are not exactly where you want to be. The laser light is handy, however I'm not really going by it. I'm just trying to get my drill lined up to where I want it to be. Now I'm going to drill this. So that's hole number 1. You can see that the top of the hole, that did actually wander a little bit, but that's okay. The top of the hole is in line with the top of my first scribe mark that I marked out. So I'm just going to do the other one now. Okay. And that's my second hole there. And again, it's ever so slightly creeped up past my line, but not too much that I'm that worried about. It's probably like 0.5 mil. Okay, so we're going to go back to the bench and I'm going to talk you through the next stage. Okay, dokie, we're back to the bench now. So because my drill press clamp is quite scratchy, I'm just going to colour in my marker points again because I've lost a lot of those references. It's just from general scratching all over the place. Now, I'm just going to rescribe that center line back over my 2 holes. And bear with me, I'm just sort of guessing that a little bit now. But there's my center line. Okay, so after I've done that center line, you're also going to want to put 2 lines that are going to run parallel with the center line. One is going to be in line with the edge of the hole on one side, and it will line up to the edge of the hole on the other side. So I'll sort of scribe that now, just to give you an idea of what that means. If you see that there, this is in line with the edge of the hole and works my way up to the top. These lines are important because this is obviously going to be the outside of your slot. And that one runs parallel. Just ignore my center line for now, it's a little bit off, but what you want is 2 parallel lines that connect between the holes. And my first hole did go a little off center towards the width, so I'm accounting for that with the measurement. Okay, Next, we're going to talk about the saw blade. Alright, let's talk about the saw frame. So this is called a jeweler's saw frame. There's a few names out there for it. It can be a fret saw. Sometimes gets named as a coping saw as well. However, saw frame was the what I got told it was. So if you look really carefully, you can see there are teeth on the end of the saw blade. Now, this is a very big saw in regards to these saw blades. They come in little packs of 13. Get them from jewellery suppliers. So these are size 06s, which is the largest size. You can move down to very, very fine, thin saw blades if you want to do delicate stuff. But I just want to cut a straight line, and I find these work just fine for me. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to take my piece of brass that I have nice and tidily marked out. And now I'm going to undo my saw blade and thread on my little piece of brass, and then push it onto my saw frame like that. Okay, so it just sort of sits there. Now, this next part is probably where you might end up breaking blades, so just be prepared to put some extra blades on. If you don't have any spare blades, you can be definitely put into a little bit of a sticky situation with that, so make sure you've always got some spares. And I can't stress this enough, but when you're cutting and sawing this out, keep in mind that this saw blade, or this saw frame, is doing the job of what your file does. So if you can do a better job with this tool, the cleaner the cut, the straighter the cut, all of that above, means you don't have to spend hours and hours and hours of time filing to fit this guy up. Now this is the boring part, which I'll talk about later, and I think some of you might be struggling with that already. So let's just talk about sawing this guy out. Now, what I'm doing with the saw blade is there's a little bit of movement in the hole, but I usually work on my right, so I'm now bringing my saw blade up against the side of the hole, and I'm then going to start gently pulling my blade down to get a cut established, and that is me sawing on that right side of my line. You see, I've just started the cut there. So this is something that you want to take your time with. Sometimes the brass can be a little bit sticky, but that's okay. Now as I'm sawing with a straight line, you want to bring the saw forward, start cutting, and you're only cutting on the downstroke. When you push back up, you're only guiding that saw blade back up. And then as I cut a triangle or a material that way, I'll then straighten up my cut to clear out the bottom section of the hole that I'm sawing out. So 45 degrees, then coming back this way, and then back to 45 degrees, and then back down this way. Change my grip. So I've cut through the first part of the slot. I'm just going to come back through and cut out the other side. Cool, so that is what has come out from my slot. Take it off the saw blade for now, saw frame. And you have the majority of your slot cut out. Approximately 99% of that hole has been cut out. Now, The filing still is a necessary part of the process. However, this makes it a more pleasurable, in my opinion, process to get in and start tidying up and cleaning up your file marks, or saw marks, should I say. I forgot to mention about what this is. This is a jeweler's peg, or a bench peg, another tool that's quite handy. This is just a piece of wood with a hole in it and a slot that tapers out. But the next step now is I'm going to be filing my knife using the edge of the saw. You can put this in a vise, you can file however you want. I like filing this way because then I can see the thickness of my knife, or of my slot. And then I can always turn things around. Oops, you see it's dropping. I can always turn things around and tidy up my slot. Yeah, you can put this in a vise as well sometimes, depending on what I'm wanting to do. So put it in a vise if I want to be in a bit of a hurry. Alternatively, you can put things this way so you can see light come through the slot. You can sort of see that easily, and I can come through this way and file my material. Now these are quite thin files, these ones that I use, so there's a little bit of flex involved with them. However, this makes the process a lot more palatable than just blindingly filing a slot to hopefully fit that slot, only to find out you filed it just too big, which is sometimes the end result, which can be a bit frustrating. Okay, so with these lines cleaned up, let's come in with a file. So I've tidied those up that side, and I've tidied up that face. I've got a little bit more filing to do on the two wider ends to tidy up that middle slot there. But that's pretty much how to do it. Now I'm working on a knife at the moment, a commission. I'm going to briefly talk about tang construction. This is relatively important with how you do your tang fit-ups. Now obviously this knife is 3.3 thick, so this slot is not going to fit very well for this knife. However, if I was doing a fit-up on this sort of knife, I'm going to be pretty close. However, this is maybe a little oversized. Oh, it's actually pretty bang on actually. You can see there, my thickness isn't too bad. Same on that side as well. It's hard to see because it's dark. But now to talk about tang construction, make sure that when you take your measurement, which is what I talked about at the start of the video, that it's at the very end of the width here. Make sure that your shoulders, these two ridges here, are nice and square, and you don't have any sort of square sections. Sorry, it's nice and square, 90 degrees, and it's all rounded. So I've rounded my tang off a lot, and I do this all the time when I'm making my knives now. Same with this one. Tang is rounded. Now the reason I do that is because if you look at the slot, when I cut my holes with the drill, what shape are they? They're round. So you may as well make this fit to the tang hole, to the bolster hole, because if you try to file and make things square, you can usually make a big mess of it up here, usually filing too much, especially sideways. Best not to do that. So I find it's better to have more material lengthways and rounded, and then follow that round shape around the tang as well. And that's just done on the grinder or with a file. So after you've done that, you should have a pretty nice tidy fit up. Again, this knife is not for this guy, however it has fit up pretty nice. There's not much wiggle there. This knife is brute de forge, so it's sort of not the right thickness anyway, but you get the idea. And I haven't done the edges on the files yet, so see how these sharp edges snag and they don't actually let my knife fit up as nice. So it's good to take the roundness and round things off to get things to fit up. Now finally, if you're still struggling with getting things to fit up nicely, you can use either your flat file that you just used. You can also use a round file and put a slight bevel or chamfer 45 degrees to the flat face of your brass. I'll just sort of demonstrate that now. You can use a square file as well, whatever works. If you look carefully, there is a bevel on the right side now, and that will help accommodate the slight roundness where your shoulder meets the tang. And if you file those gaps out nicely on the left and the right side, you'll find that your fit up will be a little bit tidier as you go. I'm just going to file this down a little bit and demonstrate that. I'm going to use a slightly better file. And then the other side. Again, you can see those bevels a little bit more clearly now. So see if that helps with your fit up. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it has helped bring my shoulders a lot closer to my brass, and I'm not struggling with a lot of gappage, if that's the right word. A lot of gaps. And then it still looks moderately tidy on the front of the knife. Again, keep in mind this knife is like a bit thicker, so but fairly close. And I could still spend a bit more time getting that to fit up just a little bit nicer as I go. So that's kind of the whole process in a nutshell. So I hope that was informative. If this is stuff that you do on a daily basis, then this video may not be for you. It's more just as an educational resource. I find it is always good to share and learn and give everyone an idea of how other people like to do it. And you might do a variant of this or a version of this process. Another couple of processes that people do is they'll drill a series of holes in line, so sort of like 3 or 4 that make up the length of the slot. I'm not a fan of that process, mainly because if you have one of your drill holes slightly off center, which you saw in the earlier part of this video was easy to do, then you'll find that you've got a little bit of extra drill bit that might be fighting you. Sort of like that, where I've just drawn a little half circle on the right here. And then that can be a fit up issue. It means you have to make it again, which can be problematic. The other thing is that after you drill a series of holes, how do you cut through the webbing between those holes? Most people will use a round file or a square file to do that. And I find that if you can just use this saw and saw this material out, it'll make your life so much easier to spend the actual time on getting the fit up and not just really getting the slot, which makes things a little bit easier for you. I have a mill now, so most of my slots are already milled out on a piece of brass, and I have bucket loads of them, so it's a bit of a luxury for me now. But this step and this process took me a long way in my knife making, and still does. And you can do it on brass, you can do it on copper, different handle materials. It doesn't have to be brass or metal, it could be wood, deer antler, ivory, anything like that would work just as well. This is 3mm brass as well, something I didn't mention originally in the video, but you could definitely do up to 5 or 6mm comfortably. If you're getting up to the really thick stuff, keep in mind that the slower you saw and the more time you take with the sawing, the better this mark or this line will be, and the less filing you have to do. It can be a little bit frustrating when you've got, let's say, 9 or 10mm to saw out. It might be best to maybe just saw a less accurate line and then just rely on filing a bit more material. Again, this just depends on what type of fit up you're doing for your knife. This is just for hidden tangs. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling on now, but yeah, I hope you found this informative, and yeah, I'll try and do some more videos like this in the future if you find them good. So yeah, thanks very much.